Hello and welcome to the How to Conduct a Successful Virtual Open House webinar. My name is Paula Hyman from the Ohio LTAP Center, and I'll be your technical support for today's webinar. Just a couple of housekeeping items. If you have questions throughout the presentation, please type them into the questions pod, and our presenter will address your questions throughout the presentation. Lastly, there is one item available to download in the handout section. If for some reason you're unable to download the handouts, just put your email in the questions pod and I'll email it to you directly. All documents will be emailed after the completion of the webinar to the group, and the webinar is being recorded. Providing successful recording, the YouTube link will be emailed to all participants and uploaded to our LTAP website. I want to thank you in advance for your participation with that, and I'll pass things off to Mr. Anthony Pankala from ODOT District 8.
Okay, so I'm Anthony Pankala, and I'm at District 8, which is in Cincinnati region, and I'm an environmental engineer, and I'm going to be going over the virtual open house meeting that we recently conducted. So the outline for today's presentation is going to be the background of the project, just so you can get some familiarity with it, the pre-PI meeting efforts that we conducted, the PI notifications that we did to get the notice of the public about the project. We'll tour the website itself so you can see what the public sees about it, and then we'll go over the summary of lessons learned from conducting this virtual meeting, and then lastly we'll do some questions if you have any. So background about the project is we have an existing pedestrian bridge that crosses I-71 that separates the community of Mount Adams with the surrounding communities. So it's in a very urban area, but the principles of this virtual public open house meeting can be applied to all types of project settings, either suburban or rural. It just so happens this one was a very urban area. So we have this existing pedestrian bridge. It's actually two bridges that are connected, and due to the ADA compliance issues with the bridge, we can't rehab them, we have to replace them. So we wanted to present the public with two alternatives. One is where the existing bridge is replaced with another one that's very close by to it, so they have the same start and end points. And then a alternative one that was located just to the south, which drops them off on another street, which is very, very close by to the original one. And then, of course, all bridges have to, or all projects have to have a no build. Our no build had a removing of the pedestrian bridge and using the existing sidewalk that was further south. So this project, we expect it to be controversial. So one of the PED bridges, as you can see on the screen here, is a gateway bridge. We kind of thought that there was going to be maybe some controversy with the project with removing a gateway to the city itself. So we wanted to reach out and have some coordination with the local government and also some of the local, I want to say officials, but community leaders. So we had a stakeholder meeting with the city Cincinnati engineers. We also included the city's accessibility advisory board member, so that we can get a little bit of extra input on accessibility and what may be an issue there, and we can maybe address that. And then the really critical member were actually the council members, since they're residents and themselves, and also that they know their citizens very well. From that first stakeholder meeting, we kind of got a good idea of what we want to go into our displays and how we're going to present to the public. On the image below, you can see this is the pedestrian bridge over the interstate itself. So the secondary meeting, we had the same people, and then in additional, we had the local community council members find volunteers to attend this meeting to help us refine our presentation and to get initial feedback on what the public thinks about our presentation, maybe find any kind of holes that we need to address that we aren't currently addressing in our planned PI meeting. And that was extremely critical to the success of this project, actually. And we'll discuss that a little bit later. So PI notifications, and in order to have a good PI meeting, you have to inform the public. So we did the standard notifications, which would be the newspaper ad. This is in the city of Cincinnati's Enquirer, so it was kind of expensive, which is unfortunate. given that it doesn't seem to be as effective as the other means of notification that we conducted. Letters to adjacent property owners, which weren't too many, was a very urban area that was mostly business owners, not residents. We did our social media posts, which is a requirement. The PI office, ODOT has its own social media platform, so we made posts on all of those. And then lastly, the press release, which got picked up by NPR, the local newspapers, and also local news station as well. So these are just the standard notifications that you have to do for a virtual PI meeting or in-person meeting for that matter. Some additional notifications that we did that were extremely beneficial to us was posting flyers. So the people using the bridge may not live immediately to the bridge itself. We had knowledge that people commute into the city, park where there's free parking, and then use the pedestrian bridge to get to where they want to go, typically to a job. So we posted flyers on the bridge itself, and then we also sent out flyers to frequently visited venues, parks, churches. Well, the parks we actually posted outside, just like we do with the bridge. But we sent it to the church, bars, and coffee shops. Mount Adams is a very nightlife kind of community. They have a lot of bars there, a lot of coffee shops. So we want to make sure that the guests of those places know about this project because they're likely to use the bridge every now and then themselves. Social media posts. We also posted on a weekly basis. And every single time we made a post, we noticed a surge in participants on the website itself. So it just goes to show that you just can't do one notification and be done with it. You need to do multiple notifications. And we did one notification every week until the very last day. And we still have participants on the last day because of that outreach. Something that was new that we did that was not typical for us to do on our project was use every door direct mailer. That's something that the United States Postal Service offers. It allows you to mail postcards to every mail address on a postman's route. So we selected some nearby adjacent postal routes, and collectively that was about 4,000 postcards that we sent out. And that cost about $2,000. So you can see like a cost between the newspaper ad versus the postcards. And here's the examples of actually what we did use. So on the left here, you have the newspaper ad, and I just want to point out the one thing that's kind of nice is that we use the QR code. That QR code here in the center here, this allows us to track who uses it. So if someone scans that code and goes to the website, we know they came from that QR code. So we know that someone saw the ad, scanned the ad, and then went to the website. We use that as often as we can. So anytime we have a physical printing of something, instead of requiring the person to type out the address, they can just take their smartphone, scan the code, and it goes directly to the website. And then the center one, we have our press release that the PO office sent out that got picked up by the news agencies. And then the right is actually an example of the flyer. Pretty much all the same information is included. It's just how it's presented slightly different. And here's an example of the postcard itself that we sent out. Again, we use the QR code so we can have a good way of tracking, and it's also a convenience factor for the public. They don't have to type in the address. They can just easily scan that. Here's examples of our Twitter posting that we did. I specifically focused on this because the Twitter was the most frequently used means to get to our project website. The project website is able to track kind of where people came from through cookies, and Twitter was the most frequent way that people came to our project website. Talking to the PIO office, when you're in an urban area, it seems like Twitter is the most frequently used social platform to notify the public. And then if you're in a suburban or a rural area, Facebook is the king. So basically, you just need to be aware of what platforms are more likely to get traction based on the area that you're conducting that project in. But be noted that we do include Nextdoor, Facebook, all the social platforms. We use all of them because you can't always be sure that which one's going to be viral, I guess you can say. But on this one, we noticed that the Roadmap Cincinnati, they're the ones who did a lot of the heavy load lifting for us because of their number of followers compared to ODOT's followers. And right before we get to the project website, I also want to show you some of the details of it. So we had over 2,000 people visit the website, and of those 2,000 visitors, we had almost 700 participants. So somebody actually who engaged in answering a question, they were counted as a participant. A total of over 6,000 responses. So if we ask them, what age are you? And they answer that, then that's a counted as a response. So depending on how many questions they ask, each question they answer is considered a response. And then comments, these would be anything that they had to type out a response. So we have a variety of different kind of questions, but we had over 2,000 typed out comments on this project. So now I'm going to switch over to our project website. Pretty straightforward, just kind of introduction on the first page, explaining why we're doing a virtual open house, kind of what the process is. We also explain how, if they have any kind of difficulties, how they can contact us on the first tab here. So this part never changes, and then from here down, it changes with every tab that you click on. So we always start off with like some softball questions to get engagement, because this research has shown that if somebody answers one question, they're likely to answer more than one question. So we ask them some very general, easy questions. Where do you live? Where do you work? Just to get that process going of getting someone to engage with the project. And then on the overview here, we kind of basically explain the purpose and need of the project. And you'll notice a theme here. We always ask questions pretty much on every page, but we don't ask a lot of them. Usually we keep it to 3 to 4 questions. And the easier it is to answer the question, like these checking a box, those are very easy. We might ask more of those, but when they're more difficult to answer, where you have to type out an answer, we ask less frequent of those because of the amount of effort it takes to answer those questions. This is kind of a new feature we did on our website. We allow people to put pins at where the locations they go when they're using the bridge, because that gives us good information for us to kind of interpret the data better. Also, we did make sure that our comments were available for the public to read. You can have these comments turned off so it's private. The public can actually make their comment private if they want to, but frequently it defaults to public, and often they choose to use a public response, which allows the public to basically see someone's comment and agree with it, or in turn disagree with the comment, saying that doesn't fit my needs, and they can respond to that. And they can also reply to comments as well, so it gives a kind of like a conversation almost. The next we'll go over to alternative one, and each alternative we devote to its own tab. So we're only discussing alternative one. We're showing the overview, and then we're going into showing the visual aspects of that alternative so the public can better understand what we're proposing to them. This was kind of a key thing for us to highlight, was what is it going to look like at night, since it's an urban area. There was a lot of initial concerns at the pre-PI meeting that we conducted with the stakeholders. They mentioned about lighting, so we want to make sure the public could see what it looks like. Lots of visuals, and at the very end here we ask specific questions about what they like about alternative one, concerns they have with alternative one. So just 2 questions, but they're very open-ended, so we didn't want to overwhelm them as well. Alternative 2, basically rinse and repeat as alternative 1, lots of visuals, night and day, same questions. And then we get to the comparison. So we want to get the public's input on what they like about alternative 1, alternative 2, but then we want to say, okay, between the 2, what do you like? And then to help them answer that question, we need to provide them information to make that comparison. So that's why we have this comparison chart provided to them, giving them some information about it, and including the walking times, and the public can click on it and they can see a broader, a more clear presentation of what it is, and they can see how big of a difference is to them. They can see where they go to and what's close by, so they can get a gauge of, okay, if alternative 1 was this, how long it's going to take me to do there versus alternative 2. And then we ask that question and then follow it up with a why, which is kind of really, really important. We really want to know why they like that specifically. Also, we included the information about the walking and riding experience on the shared use path. because we had some questions about that we weren't expecting in the pre-con meeting. So we devoted a little bit extra time to emphasize that by showing a video and also showing an example of what it looks like in real life, because they were having a hard time imagining what this ramp looks like from the visual aids that we provided. Again, we're asking a little bit of questions at the end too as well. Then aesthetics. So from the pre-con or the pre-meeting that we did, we found out that aesthetics was a big thing for the public. So we want to make sure that we ask them specific questions about aesthetics so they can provide that feedback, because they really wanted to tell us what they thought about the aesthetics. So we explained them what the different types of structures are. We show photos of what those look like so they better understand what that means, because a steel truss bridge, public may not know what that is, but if you have an image of it, then it makes it a lot easier for them to say, okay, I like that. And then we also talk about the ramp structure, how that's built. We go over baseline aesthetics, because there's a lot of concern about not having enough aesthetics. So we had a baseline aesthetic, and then we showed the examples of it enhanced so the public can understand, okay, what I want, oh, it's considered an enhanced aesthetic. So they can better tailor their comments to us so we can understand what they really mean. Again, showing examples of existing aesthetics so that the public can understand, instead of a cartoon drawing or just like a 3D image. This is a real life example of what we have in our District 8 on another pet bridge that highlights the lighting that we would use potentially. And this is a baseline lighting, so we want to let them know kind of like what does a baseline look like. Again, open-ended question, and then we ask like how important it is to them. Lots of comments on this, lots of comments on aesthetics. Then we follow up with what's the next steps in the process of the project so they understand how long is it going to take for this to take place. Since we were conducting this PI so early on, we want to make sure they understand that this is a long-term, the bridge ain't going to be built next year. It's going to be a few years down the road. And we ask them again questions. Whenever you get an opportunity to ask one or two questions, you should always ask a question, because you'll be surprised with how much comments you get back and how helpful they can be. And then lastly, on the last tab, this is where if people are going to quit, we've informed them. Now, if they wanted to, they could leave. We've already asked important questions, but we still want to get just a little bit more information from them if they're willing to provide it. And on this tab, we're asking the demographic questions, stuff that the public may not be so open with, I guess you could say, about race, language, income. These are demographics that really help us understand from a admin side, are we really getting out to the community we need to? And then at the very end, we actually asked them, how can we improve the project itself? Kind of like not just this project, but in general, how can ODOT improve future PI? Which was very, very eye-opening. We'll cover that when we have time, though. So let me go back to the presentation. So lessons learned. Holding the stakeholder meeting prior to the PI meeting was extremely helpful for having us conduct a engaging PI. So we were able to refine our presentation, provide a little bit more detail, address topics that we didn't think were a big concern, but turns out they were a huge concern. So that gave us a better opportunity to engage with the public better. The sniff test, we originally showed them some data and they instantly rejected it because it didn't seem right. So we had to refine how we presented that so they can better understand, okay, I understand how that data came about. I trust it now. Social media, the weekly posts, it was something that I didn't think would be that critical, because you would think that you're just reminding the same people over and over again. With social media, you're not going to have the same people always looking at your same posts. So it's very useful to conduct it multiple times instead of the one time that's required. The postcards, that QR code that we included with all the scanning, nobody from the newspaper scanned the QR code, but from the letters, we had multiple people scan that, and we also had multiple people scanning the flyers. So those two items that were not required were actually one of the bigger direct communications we had with the public. Social media was kind of indirect. Not too many people engaged directly from our posts, but they engaged with other people's retweeting or reposting of our information. Oh, I skipped a slide here. Asking for feedback, input, and often. You definitely want to ask questions frequently, but you don't want to overwhelm them. So you have basically just a few questions per sheet, and you want to make sure that those are applicable to what the topic you just discussed. That way they can scroll up and just like reread or reanalyze something, like look at the images again. So it's a lot easier for them to answer those questions. Also, it may not seem intuitive, but you want to ask the question that they want to talk about. People wanted to talk about aesthetics, so we asked a lot of aesthetic questions. And that engagement, one, it made them feel like they were heard, so they really appreciated us doing that. And then two, we got a lot of good specific feedback based on that. Going virtual, there is data showing people were answering questions on our website at 7 o'clock in the morning and as late as 11 o'clock at night. All hours of the day, people can come to our website on their time, on their convenience, participate, and it shows in how much people did participate, and people actually commented about that as well. With going virtual, you don't have to go live. You don't have to have a live presentation. You don't have to have a live telephone or chat box answering questions on the spot. You can do what we just did, which is considered open house. It's a static website with text and images and asking questions. That is what I call a low effort PI, because when you're going live, it takes a lot of effort to do that, to conduct that. But when you're doing virtual and you're doing open house, you have time to refine that, and you can post it and tweak it as needed. So you don't have to go all out to do virtual. And then lastly, the visual aids. I know not every project can do the three-dimensional renderings, but you can still do visual aids by finding existing structures that were built. In fact, with our consultant, when we were kind of describing them how we want them to build the mock-ups, we showed them examples of other ramp structures that we found in the US and also in like Germany, of the ramp structure itself. So if we were, in a bind, we could have used those same images to present to the public so they can get a feel for what we're trying to propose versus this engineering drawings, which can be very challenging for public to understand the sizing and the scale of the object itself. And then the one last thing before we get to questions, I just want to focus in on, oh, did it disappear on me? Let me refresh it real quick. The responses to the feedback. So many people commented about how well this was done, or for this project specifically. Many people comment about how they want this done on every project. They didn't have any comments on how we can improve it. They had comments on basically saying, do it again. And I think that's the best compliment we could have on doing a PI meeting, is saying, you nailed it, just do it again. So with that, if anybody has questions, I think we have just a little bit of time for answer some of those.
Hello, everyone. This is Jackie Anarino. I'm the NEPA Public Involvement Coordinator for ODOT, and I'm going to jump in and field any questions that might come in. Remember, you can type them into the chat box, or you can raise your hand to speak, to be called on to speak if you would prefer. Okay, so we've got our, oh, no questions so far. But I would like to reiterate that it is very seldom that we get so much positive feedback on public engagement efforts for a project. And there were so many comments from the public saying, thank you for letting us review this on our time when it's convenient for us. And, we like being able to look through it and take a pause and come back and go through it again. So I just want to stress that if you want to do a virtual open house, that's kind of an easy way to do a public meeting. It should only be an enhancement, though, not a replacement. We do know that some people prefer that face-to-face engagement, so we want to make sure that we're reaching out every way we possibly can. Okay, so here's your first question, Anthony. Anthony, great presentation. Could you explain how you tracked the QR code hits? Is that on the back end of public input, or how did you do that?
Yes. on the back end here. So on the admin side, there's just like the settings here, and then you can basically create your own project website. And we made basically specific websites for each individual item. So we had one for QR code, we had one for the newspaper ad. So whenever you make a specific website address, you can create a QR code for that web address, and whenever someone uses that address, pop it over here real quick. So the public doesn't understand that that QR code goes to a separate website, and by going to those different websites, we can track those type of people that go to those websites. So if we go to participants, I think I can quickly show.
Not to interrupt you, Anthony, but you set up a separate QR code for each type of medium, right?
So each time we had a QR code, we made a separate web address. So one for flyers, one for the newspaper ad, one for the postcards. That way we can understand better what is really getting traction for future projects. May not be very applicable for the individual project, but for a future project, it's very helpful for us. Genius. So under segments, if I go to page 3, I think, yeah, you can see newspaper ad. Actually, that newspaper ad wasn't being used until we put on the postcards. We sent the postcards a week after the newspaper ad, and it was a technical hiccup where we used the same QR code. But the newspaper ad was only ran once, and we never got any feedback on that. And then I know we have flyer ones as well. We have a lot of QR codes from that. Flyers, a lot of people scan the flyers on the pedestrian bridge or in the bars and the coffee shops. So we know that our PI engagement is working. So we don't waste our time. Also, it's kind of interesting, you see location. Don't ever get confused when you see something that's out of state. A lot of times those are VPNs. So it makes it seem like someone's not there, but that person scanned this flyer. So we know 100% they were on site when they did that. So that's where this map comes from. A lot of these ones that are not around our area are just VPNs. So just mask where their IP address is.
Great. We have a few more questions, so let's move on to the next one. How much of this PI effort was conducted by ODOT staff compared to the consultant?
The consultant handled the drafting the newspaper ad, the postcards, hanging up the flyers. ODOT on this project, we only did the virtual stuff. So the social media posting and stuff like that, we did that in-house.
Okay, what was the modeling software used to simulate the final design you mentioned with the pedestrian walkways?
That is a good question. I would have to follow up with you because that was the designer who did that and not me.
Well, we can definitely follow up. I have the contact information for the person who submitted that question, so we will follow up with you, Liz. Thank you. And actually, we can share the information with anybody who wants to know. We can let everyone know. Another question, did you provide an opportunity for people to ask questions, and how did you answer those questions?
So some of them we answered on the spot directly because that's what public input allows us. If it was a question that was really concerning and I need to be addressed right away, I didn't want them to wait the full 30 days and I can just answer right then and there. Other ones that are just not as critical, I let those kind of collect so that we can find basically a summary of what the question is, like aesthetics. There's a lot of kind of unique questions, but they all based around aesthetics. So we basically compile like a summary of general questions and we respond to those at the end of the PI, which is, we're going to do that pretty soon here. We hadn't announced what alternative we were going to pick, so we want to make sure we had that selected and then respond to the comments. Now, if we couldn't figure out which alternative we were going to pick, we would respond to the comments and then follow up with saying that we hadn't made a determination, but we will in so many months, and then when we do, we will respond to everybody else again.
But as with all of our projects, we also provide contact information on the project website. So at any time, somebody could pick up the phone and call Anthony. They could send him an email. So if that's kind of what you were asking, we always provide those extra opportunities for engagement.
I will say that I had one email comment and no phone calls on this project, but thousands on the website.
And one last question before we have to call it quits today. Did you feel that the Brought Forum invited non-topic related discussions that distracted from the project?
No, it actually wasn't too bad. There was a couple of questions that you would get with any open house, saying how it's a waste of federal funds doing this, we should be doing this instead. What was interesting is that the public kind of policed that person. They responded to them saying like, that's not ODOT's responsibility to build housing. So that like, with any PI, you're going to have some comments that are a little bit off topic. What was interesting was on this form, the public kind of basically didn't get off track. They basically brought it back to the project itself.
Okay, that's the last question for today. We're a minute past our time. I apologize for that, everyone. But if you have additional questions, we will send out our contact information with the follow-up email. And if there are future PI topics that you would like to hear about, please let us know that as well. We'll ask for that when we send our follow-up email as well. Paula? Thanks, Anthony. You did a great job.
Yes. Hi. So yes, I will send out the follow-up email, and I don't really have anything else. Thanks so much, Anthony.
No problem.
Thanks. Bye.
Thanks for joining us, everyone. Have a great day.